Andrew Jackson is associated with the movement towards increased popular participation in government. He was regarded by many as the symbol of the democratic feelings of the time, and later generations were to speak of Jacksonian democracy. Jackson offered new opportunities to the middle class. He also appealed to the farmer and the small business. He prided himself on being a man of the people, as he wanted to remove snobbery and elitism from Congress. As he came from a working class background himself, Jackson's aim was to fight for the average man. Native Americans and slaves, however, did not come into Jackson's reasoning. It can be argued, therefore, that Jacksonian democracy never truly existed, as only the average white American were of his concerns. In the eyes of some, he was viewed with suspicion and fear by people of established position, who considered him dangerous. On the other hand, at the time, slaves and Native Americans had far little respect and status than any white man. Therefore, Jackson's prejudices were in keeping with the times, some may say. However, there's also a counter-argument to that. The abolitionist movement was going strong up in the North at the time Jackson was in power. Therefore, it can be seen that he chose to ignore the movement and conduct his policies based on his own views. There are many debates surrounding Jacksonian democracy and whether it truly existed or not.
The answers lie with the physical differences the president made to the rights for the common man. The greatest party battle to date centered on the Bank of the United States, a private corporation but virtually a government-sponsored monopoly. When Jackson appeared hostile toward it, the bank threw its power against him. Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, influential members of the opposing Whig Party, acted as attorneys for the bank and led the fight for its recharter in Congress. The bank, Jackson told Martin Van Buren, is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. Jackson, in vetoing the recharter bill, charged the bank undue economic privilege. His views won approval from the American electorate in 1832, and he polled more than 56% of the popular vote and almost 5 times as many electoral votes as Clay. Outnumbered by a Whig majority, however, within government, Jackson found it difficult to get any laws or acts passed due to the staggering opposition to his views. Even in spite of this, American politics became increasingly democratic during the 1820s and 30s. Many reforms were introduced, and local and state offices that had earlier been appointive became elective. Savage attacks on these policies by some wealthy critics only fortified the belief that the Jacksonian movement was radical as well as democratic. I weep for the liberty of my country when I see at this early day of its successful experiment that corruption has been inputted into many members of the House of Representatives, and the rights of the people have been bartered for promises of office. Is it to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the axe of government to their selfish own purposes? However, I mean to change this predicament and drive democracy forward, to cast out the fraudulent and dishonest from points of power and return America back to its people. So long as this government is administrated for the good of the people and is regulated by their will, it will be worth defending. Jacksonian democracy was in theory a very real existence. Although many conservative ideals remained the same, progress towards a more democratic society was underway. Jackson was the voice, the physical embodiment, and the direct representative of the common man's views and beliefs.
Andrew Jackson was initially given a hero status by the people of America for his military contributions as an army general. Nicknamed Old Hickory because of his tough and aggressive personality, he fought tirelessly for the rights of the common man, and he attempted to remove the snobbery from Washington. His idea was to make the running of America so plain and simple that men of intelligence may readily qualify themselves for their performance. The Eaton affair became a recurring issue for Jackson. His now Secretary of War, John Henry Eaton, married a vivacious widow, Peggy O'Neill, whose husband had died in mysterious circumstances just before her marriage to Eaton. Due to this, she was snubbed by the people of Washington, in a similar way in which Jackson's late wife, Rachel, had been hounded when she accompanied her husband to Washington. So Jackson took it into his own hands to try and help Peggy, which was deemed admirable by many, but others saw this as a distraction from more important issues at the time. Although Jackson was seen as a hero by many, hence his widespread support that crossed all classes and sections across the country. This included farmers, mechanics, labourers, and even businessmen. He remained a controversial figure who was not loved by all, even though he did see himself as a man of the people. The Native Americans were the strongest anti-Jackson society. This was because of the Indian Removal Act in 1830. This meant Indians were to be removed to the west of Mississippi in return for financial compensation, but the contracts collapsed under pressure from corrupt contractors. However, Jackson ignored the corruption, and the journey made by the Indians continued, which has been known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands of people died on this horrific journey, and many people were shocked and angered by this behaviour, and was now starting to be seen as a dictator character rather than the brave army general he once was. Jackson had now come a long way from the loved war hero. What possibly caused the biggest divide for the voters was the bank veto. Jackson saw the banks as unconstitutional and represented a threat to popular liberty. Henry Clay, a sworn enemy of Jackson's, and Daniel Webster enlisted a congressional recharter of the bank in 1832, thinking that Jackson would not object too much on the eve of a presidential election. But controversial as ever, Old Hickory vetoed the recharter that Congress passed. Although Jackson did end up successful on his veto of the banks, to many Jackson seemed to regard himself as above the law. Even his original supporters were shocked by his recent actions, and although many could not agree on the rechartering of the bank, they could now all unite in their outrage at Jackson's high-handed proceedings against it, which led to the forming of a new party, who were firmly against Jackson. They were called the Whigs.